Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, Bentley's divorced. Also, the V-Team takes a look at statewide closings. And it turns out Mike Hubbard's not Michael Corleone, he's Fredo.
I can handle things, I'm smart! Not like everybody says!
Fredo, you're nothing to me now.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners.
Bet he won't take a fishing trip with Bob Riley anytime soon. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V.
The Voice of Alabama Politics with your host, Bill Brett, and the V-Team with Claire Austin, Susan Britt, Jack Campbell, Baron Coleman, Charlana Spencer, and special reports with Jonathan Barbie. Now, the #1 political show in Alabama, The V.
Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V-Team. Welcome all.
Good morning. It's a great fall Sunday morning in October.
It has been a wonderful week. We woke up the other day and thought we were in a different world. You know, earlier last week, the head of agriculture and industry, John McMillan, came out and said that Speaker Mike Hubbard need to step down. Since then, it has been a growing avalanche, hasn't it, Susan?
It has, and a long time coming. John McMillan is very well respected. He's beloved across the state. He's a statewide official that actually was the one that had enough guts to stand up and say, okay, enough is enough. Since then, all weekend, all week, the phones have been ringing all across the state of Alabama. You've had multiples come out asking for Hubbard to resign. Even some of his greatest lieutenants like Ed Henry, Alan Farley.
Yeah, but Claire, you know, on this issue of John McMillan, he was the right guy to do this, don't you think?
Yeah, because he's not viewed as, a political guy who's looking to move up the ladder, and he's solid, he's well respected, he's from the other end of the state, he's got a twin brother that's in the legislature. He's been around for a long time in Montgomery, and is just a very fair, honest guy across the board. So nobody's going to question John McMillan, you know.
Strong Republican, strong credentials, I mean.
And, he hit the nail on the head like a lot of things. It is tearing the party apart. The party may not think that, but it really, all it's doing is setting up things for the Democrats. And if Republicans don't think that, they're sadly misled.
Well, and Baron, I know you've talked about this a lot on your radio show, but I have to give McMillan credit for starting the ball rolling. I mean, people were behind the scenes getting ready to, but he
nobody's had the guts to, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But the thing with McMillan and his timing, I don't think McMillan knew what all was going on behind the scenes. No. And as far as being the right person, John McMillan is universally beloved in the Republican Party. There's not a faction of the Republican Party, which is very factious right now. There's probably 4 or 5 solid factions. They all think they're very close to John McMillan. Yeah. He's the one unifying figure right now in the entire Republican Party. For him to come out and say this is huge.
Yeah. I think so. And then right after that, Representative Jim Carnes, Republican, came out. Representative Alan Treadaway came out. Both strong conservatives. I mean, Treadaway, law enforcement officer, 26 years. He spoke up at the caucus, we hear.
Well, and I think, isn't Alan Farley a law enforcement officer as well?
Yes.
Yeah, and so you've got law enforcement figures now coming out saying, you know what, this is probably more than we can stomach. You've got, like we said earlier, chief lieutenants of the last 4 or 5 years for Hubbard, Farley, Ed Henry, coming out, not only old political foes like Jim Carnes and Alan Treadaway. I mean, it seems to be a pretty wide swath, and it's building steam very, very quickly. A week ago, none of this was happening.
I mean, Susan, one of the things that Treadaway said at one time, he said, look, as a police officer, if he got indicted for anything, He'd have to turn in his gun and badge. I mean, Mike's still holding on saying, well, it's political witch hunt.
Right.
Is that selling?
No, it's not selling anymore. I mean, it sold a little bit in the beginning, the whole innocent until proven guilty, but I think they've really worn those out.
Yeah, and I tell
law
you what.
enforcement's coming in saying, no, the law is the law. The Ethics Commission may be a ruling, but it's still not the law, and you've broken the law.
Well, you know what? I think you're talking about when people had had enough. So many phone calls and private meetings and conversations lobbying on the Hill. Many of the Republican members thought it was a witch hunt to the first Bob Riley and Mike Hubbard emails when they came out, 6 or 8 months ago. And when people saw that in black and white, that's when the wheels started turning and people were questioning him and his leadership abilities.
Well, and
it's
what preceded that too was the last special session where they tried with the Star Chamber and with HB 18. That got a lot of heads turned, and then when the emails came out, that really hit it
Well,
home.
the second batch of emails
Second batch,
convinced people that, hey, there was nothing in there about anything for the people of Alabama, Barron. It was all about them.
The first batch of emails, I guess they came out around December last year.
Sure.
They were shocking.
Yeah.
They shocked the conscience, but they didn't really lead any of the House members to change their mind. The second batch, when you look at how the deals were constructed, how meticulous and purposeful they were to avoid language in certain contracts and basically say, I'm still going to be your lobbyist in Alabama. We're just going to call me a consultant in Georgia.
Yeah.
I mean, that would not only shock the conscience, it shocked the integrity of the system.
Right. Well, Phil Williams, Representative Phil Williams, not Senator Phil Williams. I heard Senator Phil Williams on the radio defending Mike again. And
You're kidding.
All
No,
his honor,
no.
yes, he is. But Representative
The
Phil
illegal,
Williams.
the innocent until proven guilty thing again.
Representative Phil Williams has sent a letter out this week to all House members, Democrat and Republican, saying he wants the job. And he says, Susan, in that letter, it's because of how this special session was handled.
Yes, he says it was because of the bills they tried to slide through during a crisis time while they're trying to solve the budget issues. And Hubbard's team was in the background trying to slide through other things to help him in his criminal conviction. Williams not only wants to be Speaker and get rid of this blight on the House, but he also wants to reorganize the way it's done, change the way the Speaker is perceived, basically invite everybody in instead of just, taking the chair and saying, I'm in charge and what I say goes or nothing goes at all.
Well, the problem, and that's right, because what has happened, and I've been around for 20-something years up here lobbying and lived under a lot of speakers, but they've lived under a dictatorship for the last 6.5 years, and a dictatorship does not work in the free market and the world anymore. And Mike Hubbard has, he's done a decent job being a dictator, but it's not working.
A lot of people don't know Phil Williams, other than that he's his own man. He does what he wants to do. He's made a lot of money.
That's a good point. If he's a speaker that's made money, he won't need to contract and try to be stealing some money.
One of the things he said in that letter is, I will not take anybody's money except folks in my district who want to give me some. But Barron, it was a compelling argument, wasn't it?
It was a compelling argument. What a compelling story. Contrast the two stories. Right. Phil Williams, Representative Phil Williams, small farmhouse, Madison raised or North Alabama raised, worked his way up, went to the local four-year university, UAH up there, started his own business and hit it big. It's the American dream, going from a 800 square foot farmhouse to the mansion. I mean, that's the dream. But he said, I'm not going to take side contracts. I'm not going to take side employment. My job is going to be the Speaker of the House and the representative for District 6.
Well, one of the things we heard immediately from folks that we talked to, and we only got about 30 seconds, but it's like, why would a guy want to do that?
Yeah.
And I asked him, and he said, because I believe in the principles, the Republican principles that we started with. And we have gotten so far away from the conservative principles. I want to work with people to bring it back.
Yeah.
And now he's the guy that I think can do it. So my hat's off to him and his leadership from Huntsville, Alabama.
And it's a cry that's long been waited for, and it's so refreshing to hear, finally.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with more news and analysis.
The V is sponsored by Spot On Strategies Group.
Sadly, this happens too often in families with autistic children.
First nightmare, their child wanders off, disappears, and is nowhere to be found.
Where her body was found just a couple hours ago.
An autistic boy wanders away from home and dies.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. Claire, sadly, the Bentley's divorce is final. 50 years of marriage gone. It has to have been a tough time for the first couple. Do you think the state can now start to put this behind us and that people will stop with the scandal mongering?
I would think so. I would hope so. I think it's been dragged through the mud enough. Unfortunately, they're divorced, but it's done and over with, so put it to bed and let's just all move forward. I mean, their personal life needs to be their personal life, and that needs to be put behind everybody.
Barron, it looked like a fairly equitable divorce. It didn't look exaggerated after 50 years of marriage.
No, I mean, it certainly wasn't one-sided.
Right.
Not one person got everything and everybody got stuck with everything else. No, and I agree with Claire. I mean, it is time to put it behind us. No matter what happened, no matter what led to it, people are entitled to make mistakes. Even governors are entitled to make mistakes. Even first ladies are entitled to make mistakes. Whatever happened, I don't see how it impacts anything on a forward-going basis.
Right.
I really don't.
Well, I mean, Susan, you know, you and I have been happily married for a long, long time. It still has to be painful no matter what the cause, don't you think?
Has to be.
We have to look at healing now.
Yes, we need to look forward to healing. I mean, the biggest impact this is going to have on his office has already happened. It's over now. We just need to move forward. If there's somebody else in either camp, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the office.
No,
it doesn't affect taxpayer money. Let's just
frankly,
move on.
I think as media people, we should quit talking about it, move on. We got much more pressing issues in this state
Absolutely.
than to worry about somebody's
I agree, but I did not want to
business.
be neglect in bringing it out and saying that we wish both Governor Bentley and Ms. Bentley
happiness,
all the happiness in the world, and their children and grandchildren. There are people who are not very happy with the governor this week and last week, and because of these closings. Now, technically, Bentley is not closing parks, and he is not closing driver's license offices. This is a result of the budget. But what's the game plan here, Barron? It looks fishy.
Well, this is what happens. The legislature sets a budget, and then they leave town and go home. And then the governor executes upon that budget, and they go, "Oh, what are you doing?" The reality is they know exactly what he was doing. They knew what the results of the budget would be when they passed the budget. They either needed to make strategic cuts in other places if they wanted these services to continue to be offered, or they needed to raise revenue sufficient to cover these services. But you can't have your cake and eat it too. That's what they are telling their constituents they thought they had passed, and they're lying.
Well, I think that's pretty straightforward.
Next topic. Let's move on.
And people are, for the last year, in last almost 8 months, people have been upset about these state parks. And I think that's probably one of the trickeries of why they did that, because people are going to be outraged about the state parks.
The state parks are something loud that everybody understands. Not everybody cares that they closed 31 driver's license offices.
Now, we're just going to have to stand in line more.
Right. Now, they're saying it only affects 5% of overall driver's licenses in the state. But what does that tell you? That tells you that these are in rural areas. They are out in very low, small populations that they would have to drive a long distance to get a driver's license or a voter ID.
It appears on the surface, at least from a cursory glance, that this is disproportionately targeting folks in the black belt and the racial minorities. I mean, it really does. I'm sorry.
Well, and those are more rural areas.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to target rural areas for closures because they're not as busy, naturally there's going to be a lot of overlap there.
Right.
But from an optics perspective, when you're requiring voter ID and then you go close the only place to get a voter ID in counties like Macon, Lowndes, Sumter, Hale, Greene.
Yeah.
It's bad optics, I'll say that. I love Spencer Collier. I think the world of him. I think he does a great job. But this is one that really doesn't look all that good.
No, it doesn't. And I mean, it may be, not coincidental, but just the nature of how you have to do these things. But, it is obviously that they're targeting more Democrats than they are Republicans.
Well, just like you said, it's numbers, it's business, it's people that come in the door. I mean, and when you say Macon County, that's close enough to whether it's Lee County and Montgomery County or places like that, and the Black Belt, and there probably needs to be some more there, but a lot of them are close to Tuscaloosa.
But then you have to take into effect that a lot of these communities are very poor, and do they have the money to do this travel? Do they have the $20 in gas it takes to get there and back? That's another.
Well,
factor.
I mean, it's bad all the way around. I don't know how you fix it. I tell you, one of the worst things that we saw, and nobody seems to be howling about this, is they gutted the Attorney General's office, Claire. I mean, they cut them to the bare bones.
Well, that was by design and by intention. That was very intentional to do that. And, that and the courts and the DAs. But, yes, they really have gutted that. And I think the man on the 5th floor has been very responsible for a lot of that. But my understanding in the last couple of weeks that the Attorney General's office has been meeting with some members in the legislature, and the legislators have come to them saying we want to do what we can to help you, potential supplemental monies and different things like that.
Susan, I mean, the way it looked, you'd almost have to cut down half the staff, but Mike Lewis, the communications director over there, says not going to happen, and Alice Martin has made a commitment, we hear.
Yes. I think they have 170 employees over there. And even if they had to cut some of those employees, the one office that will not be touched is the white collar crimes unit. That one will stay intact.
So that's what they're
down to the very last dime.
Yeah. Well, Hubbard made this thing about prosecutorial misconduct and all this goodness. Well, they're going to stay in business. Nothing there. Barron, are you hearing some things that people do think this was all?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't, not just hearing it, I mean, people are flat out saying it. It is absolutely by design. You don't take a meat cleaver to your only statewide law enforcement agency and expect that people aren't going to assume there's a vendetta behind it. I mean, this is the people who, consumer protection, all the criminal appeals, represent the state of Alabama when we're sued, represent the state when our statutes and constitutional provisions are challenged. And you're cutting them? I mean, you're not cutting them, you're almost destroying them?
Excuse me, it's egregious.
It is,
And then if you pair that with the Star Chambers bill, the sky's the limit.
It didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, it didn't. But I tell you, I was talking with somebody the other day, and they've heard this kind of rumor mill, and I talked with them, and I said, Luther Strange is one of the most honest guys I know, and this is why they've gone after him, because he's not political. That is not what he does. He's not a political guy. But this budget thing, I hope you're right and they can work through this crisis.
Well, he's got a top-notch administrator with Alice Martin over there as his right-hand deputy, and then she'll work through this. And
that's very exciting.
There's been some of these things about complaints about the Ethics Commission. The other day I said, well, if you put Matt Hart in charge of the Ethics Commission, we won't have any more problems.
He doesn't have a problem reading the law and actually understanding what he reads. How amazing is that?
Do you think he can get approved?
No.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. You're watching The V. We'll be right back in just a few minutes.
He needs to stay exactly where he is in the Attorney General's office.
It was just something funny that Barrett not work.
No.
Sadly, this happens too often in families with autistic children.
First nightmare, their child wanders off, disappears, and is nowhere to be found.
Where her body was found just a couple hours ago.
An autistic boy wanders away from home and dies.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. I have to tell you, about 4 years ago, we had a meeting with Speaker Hubbard. And when Susan and I left...
Oh, he would meet with y'all?
Yeah, this was before...
This was before we launched.
Before we actually started telling the truth about him, because we didn't know the facts. But we met with him, and when we left his office, I looked at Susan and I said, I feel like I just had a meeting with Michael Corleone.
And I said, I feel like I need a bath.
But, well, yeah, she did. But she's snarky like that. When we went out and visited the prison the other day, she said, it's terrible, but I feel like I'm apartment shopping for Mike. I mean, she says these things. Barron, does your wife like that?
No.
No, she's not. I don't believe that for a minute.
She's just a little cynical.
Because Claire is.
The answer is no.
That's because you're on the record.
But, what we've come to realize is that he is not Michael Corleone to Bob Riley's godfather. He's Fredo, isn't he?
He is. He's a little whiny, snivelly, shoots too soon, alienates everybody. I mean, it is a bizarre comparison.
Yeah.
I told Bill the other day, I said, I want to go through all these emails and put the I love you, Bob Riley's, and then I realized that's going to take too much time.
Yeah.
He is unmanly in so many ways.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a man snuggle up to another man like that? I mean, it's sickening.
It's weird.
It is.
It's weird.
Godfather is one of my favorite movies because, you just have to watch it as a guy every so often. But he's just shown himself to be weak. He's not strong.
He's not. And I think that's one of the frustrating things about this is when you look at these emails, when you hear the stories now that are starting to come out, you see a portrait of a man who's paranoid, always thinks everybody's out to get him, is very unsure of himself, gets in over his head very easily, and then tries to figure out how to get out of it. Very greedy, whiny, and it's frustrating because the people who are in charge of electing the speaker, they're not putting all that together.
Right.
I think they're busy doing other things.
Did you see? In some of these emails, he would accuse top business executives around the state of being against him.
Yeah.
When there was no indication they ever were against him, it was just paranoia, right?
Yeah, I think he's got it. I almost feel sorry for him because I think he has this very insecure paranoia,
that's
deep
coming,
darkness.
That's
about
coming to
him.
light through these emails, the things he's saying in these emails to Bob Riley, or about these top business executives who essentially said, well, we had no idea that we were against him.
And Barron, you and I looked at this a long, long time ago. He talks to Bob Riley and he calls him his father figure, and if he could only be half the man Riley is, he'd be happy. Mike Hubbard's father is alive.
Yeah, he is.
He is alive.
In Georgia.
He's a career government civil servant, seems to be an honorable guy, put a nice family together, gave Mike a nice living. I think he has a living sibling still with an in-law. And
has
it's
anyone
very
here
weird.
ever heard him, has he ever brought his father to an event that you've seen?
I've seen his wife, Susan's family, that's from down in the Wiregrass.
Yeah.
But I've never seen anything of his family from Georgia.
Not in the courtroom, not in the House
when
chambers,
he got,
nothing.
signed in as speaker or sworn in as a speaker.
No.
I got to tell you,
that tells you something, doesn't that tell you about somebody that would wipe out their original parents and all their family? That speaks volumes.
I got to tell you, if my father were alive today, there's no way. If I got award as dog catcher, I'd want him to be there.
Sure. Absolutely. He'd be here every week.
Yeah. Well, my mother would be trying to take over the set. So.
She would.
It's just eerie and crazy to me. But we discovered, and Susan, Barron, and I, and I guess you were out of town, Claire, we had a good chuckle about this one. Mike Hubbard's lawyers file a motion that says, we're fighting grand jury leaks. The prosecution is leaking grand jury information. And lo and behold, they redacted the grand jury statements, the defense did, but you could take it off in Microsoft Word. I mean, how crazy is that?
Yeah, it takes about 90 seconds to remove the redactions and see exactly what's behind there. And it is bizarre. It is bizarre because the pleading itself was complaining that the prosecution's pleadings were accidentally or purposely leaking grand jury testimony. And in making that case, they're leaking grand jury testimony.
Right. Now, but don't you find it interesting that they left us a clue? The very last paragraph of all the redactions, not in the middle, not at the top, the very last of all the redactions, you could actually see the text through the black boxes. So that says to anybody that's got any computer savvy at all, there's text there. How do I get to it?
I mean, we all decided to stop.
Yes.
But unlike them, out of respect for the grand jury process, the sanctity of the Secrecy Act. But, there are people that think they did this on purpose to try to trap somebody into leaking.
I am one of those people, because when I first saw that clue, I thought, oh, yay, I can go back and look through the rest of this and maybe find out something I shouldn't know. And I thought, I don't want to know that. I don't want to be called on a stand and have to testify that I don't know anything about a grand jury testimony when I do. So I'm leaving it alone right here.
Well, we're under the SHIELD law.
I still don't want to know. I don't want anything suspect at all.
That was smart of you.
Thank you.
It was. But I mean, and I think that Mark White or some of them could go, we'll tempt them. We'll tempt them, get them to break the law.
And see if you'll print it or say it on TV or radio.
And that way he can scream at the judge and say grand jury leaks. See, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
The leaks went the other way.
All of them.
Listen, we got about 2 minutes here. I think a lot of folks have missed this. In the last two filings, Mike Hubbard has asked for an independent counsel to be appointed by the governor to investigate the prosecution. I mean, Claire, you worked in the Attorney General's
The
office.
whole thing is egregious. It's nuts. It's another deflection. It's he and his lawyers trying to take the heat and the real thing off of his case and what's coming up, and he just wants to try to, throw another bone and let the media go over there. It's crazy. No, I've never heard of such.
Well, I hope he turns out to be Archibald Cox.
The whole thing is to get the headline. You're right.
Right, that's it.
The headline of the Opelika Auburn News, the dominant newspaper in Lee County, he wants it to say, Hubbard requests independent counsel to investigate prosecution. Because that's you get that headline and you move on and you're tainting the jury pool a little at a time.
That's all it is.
Well, Nixon asked for an independent. He reported an independent counsel. That didn't work out too well, did it, Susan?
Well.
It's just crazy. It's just more delays, as you say, deflect and deny. I don't think that's going anywhere. Do you, Barron?
No, I don't think so. It'll be interesting. I don't even know, has he formally asked the governor or not, or is he just asking the judge? The judge can't order the governor to appoint it.
Right.
And it doesn't make sense. The whole pleading is nonsensical.
It is.
And this is along the same lines of Van Davis doesn't have the authority. The grand jury was improperly impounded. This is the same stuff. And Judge Walker has already ruled on all this.
Yeah, he's already ruled on all that.
Yeah, I hear that everybody's waiting for the 26th, October 26th hearing, and that's going to be a big deal. That's going to be a dud.
Yeah.
Because there's
The
nothing
last
new.
one was a dud.
Yeah.
They did this once before and built it up, and it was a dud.
There's nothing. And we're going to expose them. No, you're not, because you're the crook.
You've had how many days in court now, and you haven't exposed Jack?
All right, we're going to leave it right there. You've been watching the voice of Alabama politics. You can catch news stories every day on alreporter.com. Like us on Facebook, watch us on YouTube, and always join us on Sunday mornings. Have a great week.